but I'll do a lot of my speaking through my fingers too. So. Thank you. So, probably that was the first song that I ever learned that wasn't taught to me by my piano teacher. I learned it from the preacher's son. I might have been 7 years old. And in fact, I have a nephew. I'm bad with that. A nephew who himself, I think he's 7, has just learned that song, which it turns out is really heart and soul. I didn't know that back then. And it's sort of a rite of passage that children all learn, usually from other kids, how to play that. And it's fun because you need 2 people to play it properly. Somebody has the melody and somebody else has the accompaniment. So, as simple as that is, listen what can happen with it. Let's take it to 1915 or 1920. This is how it might have sounded then. Let's move it forward to maybe the swing band era, the 30s up to the 40s. Okay. So moving forward in time, we can take it to the 50s. Charlie Parker came along in the 40s. Dizzy Gillespie, Oscar Peterson, and they couldn't leave well enough alone. They completely, well, here, we'll take this to the 45, 55. Miles Davis, 1960 and beyond. And at this point, it may be close to unrecognizable because they just kept stacking chords and notes on top of notes and stuff. So this would be sort of modern jazz. Okay, now bear in mind that what we started with was I never stopped playing that. What you're hearing is the simplicity that underlies the apparent complexity of music. One of the things I believed was that music is very, very complicated, and that to understand it at all could take a lifetime, or at least 6, 8, 10 years of intense devotion and study. And that was just heart and soul, just 4 chords. But we add tinsel, we add decorations, we add ornaments, but underneath there is something simple happening. And actually, this may require math, because music has a lot of numbers. And so, how many of you can count to 6? because honestly, that's going to be the level of complexity that we're working at. And to demonstrate, so I teach piano lessons now over at the Shed Institute in Eugene. And I love getting the younger kids. They're wonderfully open. And the kind of lessons that we do are nothing like the lessons that I got as a young child from my conservatory-trained Dutch piano teacher. She was classically trained, and she showed me all the proper ways to hold your fingers and technique. And Hannon, if anyone here's a pianist, they'll remember doing et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You had to drill and drill and drill. These are exercises. They're to make your fingers strong, to work together. In fact, if you can flap your fingers, which you learn to do in piano lessons, and I didn't like being bored. More than, and I have to tell you, I was not probably renowned for practicing. But once I figured out that you could use that skill, I call it flappy fingers. So if you can flap your fingers, well, that skill alone makes it possible to play different notes, the same flappy fingers, and now you can play, which I like. Or let's try this. Now, I have gotten applause for doing that. And it's just, I love that, because some of the easiest things to do on an instrument sound hard. Conversely, some of the hardest things to do can sound easy once you've mastered them. And so that flappy fingers thing turns into, and because the note choice makes the difference, it sounds, to me, it sounds really cool. And why make young students wait for 4, 6, 8 years before they get to play something they think is cool when you don't have to? Case in point. Anybody heard a song called Lean on Me? Well, that's good. Bill Withers, I think. We all have sorrow. So if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me. No, we're not going there yet. So, nice little melody. I can play it just on the white keys. If we call our home note 1, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, or for those of you who've seen The Sound of Music, do, re, mi, so, fa, do, re, mi, fa, fa, mi, re, do. Okay, so we have numbers that you can assign to notes. In this case, it's just what we call a scale, which is an ascending series of notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 8 is the same as 1. That's why they call it an octave. So the piano starts over again every octave. So anything that you can play in one place on the piano, you can play any place on the piano. And this I learned from when the church pianist, when I was 12 years old at the Baptist church, and he was retiring, and for some reason, they let me go in and fake what I could of the church hymns. And hymnals, if you've ever looked inside of a hymnal or sung from a hymnal, they're done in 4-part harmony: bass, tenor, alto, soprano. So it can sound kind of thin because the piano has 88 keys. It's an orchestra. but the hymnal keeps things inside of singing range. However, you can use those octaves to sound amazing. Three notes. Three notes. Now you can spread those all over the keyboard and sound like you know something. And church pianists and church organists know this. I don't know if they give it away or not. I call it the Liberace method. And it's really fun because both for little kids who discover that if they can play something in one place, they can move it all over. But also, you know, I meet in my travels when I'm part of concerts, afterwards I'm always meeting people who maybe they themselves are church pianists or organists, or their parents forced them to take piano lessons and they quit as soon as they could, and then they say, oh, I regret that I quit, I wish I could do what you do. And if they studied piano, they already have the ability to do certain things that you practice in piano lessons. Sometimes you have to learn to scramble the order of the notes. So these are arpeggios. Same three notes, different order. Or you might need to play them all together, which is called a chord. Those three notes, instead of rolling them, we just play them at one time. Different inversion of those notes. Different inversion of those notes. Still only three notes. Put them between two hands. Still three notes. And so one of the wonderful things about piano is the elegance and the simplicity of certain things that you can do, and you don't have to wait to be able to do them. So, lean on me. Whoops, can you see my hands? So one of the reasons I want this here is so that I won't have to tell you what I'm doing so much. You can actually see it for yourself. Now I'm going to take what I can do with just one finger, and I'm going to add two fingers. I'm going to spread them out like this, like a crab claw. Now I'm still playing just those four notes, and I'm still playing the exact pattern. All I've done is I've added a second note, but it's no more complicated because the second note is doing nothing. In fact, I'm not wiggling my fingers at all. This kind of playing does not require me to wiggle my fingers. I just have to move sideways. Let's try it with three. So I'm going to make a claw, this time with three notes. Move it up. Move it down. Stop in the middle. Hold that. Lean on me. You can tell this was written at a piano because it just absolutely lays out perfectly on the geography of the piano. Now we can add left hand with one note, and the one note in the left hand duplicates what the melody in the right hand is doing. So again, without expending more brain power, now that second part, that little thing you just heard, that little flourish, the technical term for that is ear candy. And that's the bit, if you've ever taken piano, if you've ever had to learn from a book, a beginner's book, they never leave that in. They take it out. They take all the cool stuff out and make you play the least. Okay, so I have a 5-year-old student who can play this now, because if anybody can just take a shape and move it sideways, you can play Lean on Me. But extra credit, and because it's cool, they want it. They want it really bad. So even if it's a little more complicated, it's cool. And so we'll add in the ear candy to make it fun, to make it special, and so that they know they're playing it just like it actually is. Now, Martin is a student of mine. Martin was 7 years old, and he wanted to learn to play Fly Me to the Moon. Fly Me to the Moon. Sinatra owned it, but it's an older song than that. And I'm thinking, you're 7 years old, Martin. We've only been in less than 6 months. This is, a jazz standard. It's not beginner material. It isn't the most complicated, but it's intermediate jazz. And so I'm thinking, all right, am I a teacher or am I a teacher? Fly me to the moon. Anybody remember that? Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars. Thank you, and you, and you, and you. I'll be here all week. Try the veal. Tip your server. Okay. So, Fly Me to the Moon, it has a melody, it has chords. The chords themselves are not, I wouldn't say, simple. But I have to break this down for Martin, who wants to learn to play it. Now we listen to the melody, it goes, fly me to the moon. Well, that sounds a little like Flappy Fingers from a moment ago. La, 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 la. So if I can put it in a key, let's say I can keep it on the white keys, where Martin's most comfortable. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And let me is like on pattern. One of the deep, mysterious, dark secrets of music is pattern. And I found a pattern that goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, all Martin has to do is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move it down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, move it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here I actually have to break pattern. For one single note, I need a black key. So that's a slight tweak to the pattern. Now he can play Fly Me to the Moon. I didn't teach him the up part. Start with what's easy. Start with what's essential. Start with the pattern. You fill in the gaps later. And we did. Etc. But that's only one hand. Martin wants to play the whole song. And so here we have another problem because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, at least 7 chords. Okay, how do we teach something that's playable, that sounds like the song, that isn't dumbed down? Well, remember 1, 3, 5 builds a chord, 3 notes. So I'm going to start on this note, A, put a third above that, that's the 3, put a third above that. Incidentally, 1 note, you can make a melody. 2 notes makes a harmony. 3 notes, and you potentially have a chord. So a chord is 3 notes or more. So I've constructed a chord that goes with, but we're going to need more than that, or we get so here's what I figured out. I'm going to take the top 2 notes and move them 1 space. So, all that's happening in the left hand is chord, move the top 2 fingers. Move the whole thing down, chord, move the top 2 fingers. Move the whole shape down again, chord, top 2 fingers. Now you can do this, even Martin at 7 years old. Move it down, move it down. So Martin was playing in one session in about 30 minutes. Now that is really cool. And we don't, if you had to put notation on it, if I had to put it in a beginner book, I would probably have to use notation, we call them quarter notes, basically 4 notes to the bar, and it would sound a lot stiffer. But Martin's not encumbered by sheet music yet. So he can play it the way he thinks it goes, using the notes and the pattern. This is just wonderful, because if he's heard it a certain way, or if he sings it a certain way, or if his sister, in this case, sings it a certain way, and that's why he wanted to learn it, it turned out, so he could play it with her. He can play it at any speed or with any rhythmic. He can play it as a waltz. Okay, so this is wonderful. Now I can teach, you know, this is, I wouldn't call this easy, but when you find a pattern that makes it make sense. And here's where we come to what I call the cocktail napkin theory of music. Now, here's something I have been ashamed of and maybe a little embarrassed about, a little sheepish, my whole life, which is I always took the shortcut. I never wanted to practice. If I had to practice, I got bored, I got frustrated, I didn't like it very much. So I was finding like the short way to get where I wanted to go. As a result, I became an expert on taking shortcuts. And I did not understand this until I started teaching, that for me, and I don't perform with sheet music, it's in my head, but I'm not that smart, my memory's not that good, and it's getting worse. So for me to play a song and in concert means I have to have it compressed into the smallest amount of information necessary to complete the song. And that's the cocktail napkin theory. I posit that if I cannot write everything I know about the song on the back of a cocktail napkin, then I don't understand it yet. I have not figured out the song's own internal logic. So let's take a song. Here's another one that some of my younger students like, the Pink Panther. Pink Panther. Now, what's fun about this is I teach it as just shapes and patterns. First of all, that's 2 notes. They're in what we call a perfect fifth, or well, that's what classically trained musicians call that. It's an interval of 2 notes called a perfect fifth. Guitar players know it as power chord. And you use it to play like. However, it works for a lot of other things too. Now, all I'm doing, if you can see my hands, is I'm starting on 2 black keys, the bottom one of the 2, and sliding off of them, sliding onto the white keys right above them. That's kind of fun. If you're a kid and you're like, ooh, I can slide off of that. Now we're going to do the same thing, 1 step up on the next black keys. Bingo. Now again, I'm not wiggling my fingers. This does not take technique. You don't need to have studied for 3 years before you can do this. if you can slide off of a black key, you can play. Most of my students who've learned this song can't snap yet. So they can play the song before they can snap the song. Now you hear that one, we do the same thing. Now we slide down off the black keys. Henry Mancini made it so easy. I love Henry for that. Thank you, Henry. Let's look at the melody. Melody also has shape, it has pattern, it has form. It sounds complicated. It you could say it's complicated. If you had to memorize every note, you'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. I count 18 notes in the first line, in the first stanza. So that's too much work. Let's not do that. Let's see. So we have target notes. We have approach tones that happen just before, and then we have like the note, the target. So we're actually landing on that. Now we have this. Here's our target note. Here's the approach note. It's a half step underneath. So now we go, and these again, we can slide off the black keys. Not bad. Now we do the same two again. Next one, and that one's different because instead we come from the top down to our target note instead of from underneath. So underneath, 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 above. But if we think of these as just 3 target notes, now we have the same 3 notes we used for Fly Me to the Moon. 1, 3, and 5. From that, all we're doing is sliding into them from 1 note below or above. And that last note there is the oddball, the sour note. And this is fun because it doesn't belong. It's out of place. It sounds a little cacophonous. So it's cool because again, we have an out-of-place note, which that third one's the same as the first, so no new material there. Here we get to slide off the black key to play this blues note, which is fun. Okay, now this could be considered complicated because there's a few notes in it. However, I have a secret for that too. Digression. Pianos have black keys and white keys. There are 88 keys, but they're grouped as black keys and white keys. And for most of my life, I believed that it was just arbitrary. They were arranged in 2, then 3, then 2 black keys, then 3 black keys, 2, 3, all the way on up. And I think I understood at one level that it had to be broken up in some way, or you'd never know where you were. If it was just black key, white key, black key, white key, all the way up, there's no geography, you couldn't find your place. So yeah, they broke it into 2 and 3, but what I did not know was that there's a reason, and it's a pretty deep reason. So, one of the things about the black keys, if you've never touched a piano before, or you have a kid who's never played piano and wants to sound good, just have them play on the black keys. There are no wrong notes on the black keys. I shall demonstrate. No wrong notes. They go together. They go together. And I can do this with my eyes closed, and I can, as long as I don't accidentally hit a white key. So there's something going on there. And my piano teacher didn't know what it was. There's something special about those 5 notes. And I made it my business to figure out what, why, what. Now, if I start on this black key, it's the top one of the 2, and I just come straight down, it's the 2 and then the 3, That sounds a lot like the Pink Panther. Now if I slide up to the white key right next to it, now we have the run that we need to complete the song. And it is precisely aligned with the black keys right next to them. And it is actually 5 notes, 5 black keys, 5 notes. So the name of that is called the pentatonic scale. 5. And it turns out it's the basis for so much. In fact, if I told you that Amazing Grace and the Pink Panther are the same, you wouldn't believe me. But it goes further than that. Let's say, okay, watch my fingers. I'm going to play Amazing Grace on just 5 keys, the black keys. That's Amazing Grace. So simple, you can play it on just the black keys. So simple that you, even without being taught, you could find it and figure it out on your own. But it doesn't stop there. We don't have a lot of time. I'm going to speed through this. Let's say we could do. This is Old Man River. Same 5 notes. Old Man River, that old man river, he must know something, but don't say nothing. He keeps on rolling, he keeps on rolling along. 5 notes. It's a sunny day today, so that's apropos. It's Blue Skies, Irving Berlin. Irving Berlin, little known fact, self-taught, only could play in 1 key. 1 key, and not that well in that key. Irving Berlin, master songwriter, played in 1 key and had a piano specially built that had levers so that it moved the entire action and all the hammers and all the dampers sideways so that he could write songs in any key. The key he taught himself to play in was F sharp, G flat, the black keys. So when he wrote Blue Skies, he played it on the black keys. I now know this for a fact, because you can play Blue Skies on the black. Here, one more. I could do this all day. Is this Smokey Robinson? No? Temptations? So that's the left hand, black keys. Right hand, melody. I guess you'll say, what can make me feel this way, my girl? Just the black keys. So there's something special, something really powerful about those notes, those 5 notes. But I've left out several other notes. Now, I don't know if I've mentioned this. There are actually, while there are 88 keys on a piano, there are only 12 discrete notes. They repeat over and over again. If you play all 12 of them, that's called a chromatic scale. And it sounds like this. 2 hands. So if you've ever wanted to play all the notes of the piano, you can do it, but it isn't music. Did I just say that? So when I play the black keys, what notes am I leaving out? Anyone? The white keys. I've left out the white keys. Precisely. I told you this is hard. This is hard. Music is hard. It is. Now, the white keys, so there must be something. What happens with the white keys? Now I just played them in order and it sounds like music. So the white keys have something special happening too. There's 7 of those and they form something we call the major scale. And that is simply the 7 notes that most music is built on. Most all Western music is built on. Now I've completely lost my train of thought here, but something came to me just a second ago. But I'll be darned if I can remember what it was. So, all of your favorite songs are built on those notes, the notes of the major scale. Now, the way the major scale was taught to me, and every kid has to learn all of their major scales. There's 12 of them in all, because there's 12 possible notes you can start on. It's whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Whole steps are 2 half steps. So there's math again. That's really hard to remember for me. I was like, whole step, half step, half step. That makes no sense. What is that? I mean, who came up with that? Who thought that was a good idea? So instead, I taught myself a different way of understanding that. And it comes with intervals. So remember the fifths that we played for, or that guitar players use for Johnny Be Good. We're going to use fifths, and this time I'm just going to keep stacking fifths all the way up. So I'll start here. So there's that fifth. It's a distance of 5 notes away. Now each of those is just the same distance away from its neighbor below and above. So always fifths, perfect fifths all the way up. And this is actually how a lot of instruments are tuned. So you'll hear like, whoops, let's see. Fiddles, cellos, basses, guitars use that as sort of a standard, fourths or fifths. Now what happens if I take all of those notes and slam them together, compress them all into one space? Let's see. So I'm going to take that one down, take that one down, that one down. Major scale. The notes of the major scale are so closely related to each other that if you splayed them out in their mathematically perfect arrangement, they're identical in distance from each other. And then when you squeeze them together, you get this thing that was explained to me as whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. So they do make sense. This is true for the black keys as well. Not that it matters, but you can get all 5 black keys by playing fifths. That's called the circle of fifths, and we don't have time for that today. But there's this big circle of 12 notes, and everything in music follows that. Everything. In fact, this thing that I played at the beginning, that's circle of fifths. Let's see. 4 chords, all separated by fifths. It's everywhere. And once you'd understand, once you've kind of absorbed the patterns, the shapes that music is composed of, that comprise the music, then it sort of unlocks things. Here's something I believed when I was young, that music, like playing by ear, is something you were born with. So you either have it or you don't. And you know, it's just a gift. And I was wrong. And I know this now because I've been teaching for about 8 years, private lessons, and I had to figure out how to teach what I was doing innately, what just came naturally to me. And I can tell you that what did not come naturally to me was note reading, playing out of a book, playing classical repertoire was very, very hard for me. Story about Dave Brubeck, actually. The conservatory he was studying at wanted to kick him out because he couldn't read music. And some of the professors intervened and said, no, he's really good. You can't just kick him out of the conservatory. So, you know, they get together and they decide, okay, we'll let him stay, but only if he promises, and he had to sign this, never to teach music. True, actually. So I read music at roughly the level of Dave Brubeck, which is to say, if you give me the weekend, I can hack through most written music, but I don't sight read music at all, and not because I didn't take 12 years of lessons. It's hard. What classical pianists say to me is, how do you always know which note to play? You don't have any music, and it's like you're making it up as you go, and you play a different note every time. And my response is, how can you play every single note, exactly the same note, in exactly the same place, at exactly the right time, with exactly the same fingerings, over and over again? Like that for me is mind-blowing. So the thing that I have that a classical pianist doesn't have is, I have all kinds of choices. Like if I can play, you know, notes in any order I feel like at any given time, because I understand what it will sound like. So I got a little off. We were doing the Pink Panther a while ago, and then we went to flat. We did that. See, I did bring notes. So, simplicity. Everything that I've shown you is the simplest I know how to boil it down to. And because I've boiled it down to simple, I can use those to make music in any style. I'm using the same, and this, I think, classical pianists will learn a piece, and then when they start the next piece, it's like starting with a blank sheet of paper. Nothing from that piece is relevant to the next piece. And that goes on and on and on through a career, so that at the end of however many years or decades, if there isn't a sheet of music in front of them, they won't know what to play, even though they've absorbed repertoire for years and years. Whereas for me, okay, that's a chord. I used it for Fly Me to the Moon. That is also a chord. 2 chords, and I can boil Fur-Elise down to and that means I can use what I have, say, extrapolated. No, that's not it. I have abstracted from one song to use for the next song. And in fact, Beethoven, I don't know if he invented the blues, but he certainly used it. That's the blues. So I drove my piano teacher nuts. I couldn't help myself. So major where it should be minor, minor where it should be major. I thought it was funny. So there it is. If I can understand a song at some elemental level, I don't have to memorize 157 notes. I could memorize 5 or 6 shapes. And shapes, if you can see this, I had to learn, everyone has to learn their chords and their scales. But the shapes keep repeating. So instead of 12, I've got it down to 4. So there's the 1, 3, 5 that I can build on white keys. To my hands, they're the same. With my eyes closed, it's exactly the same. There's no difference physically, technically. So that knocks out 3 right there. Now I'm going to use one that has a black note in the middle. And I don't know if you can see this, but it actually creates a triangle with the white keys on the outside. There's 3 of those. And they're identical to your hand. So without learning any new techniques, now you know 6 out of 12. Now I'm going to turn that triangle upside down. If you can imagine this, we're going to put 2 black keys on the outside and 1 white key in the middle. Sounds like that. Move it around. Now again, I'm not changing my hand position. This is exactly like being I guess I call it a claw, a crab claw, where there's really nothing to wiggle and no technique involved. Just make one shape, and now we've knocked out 9 out of 12 possible keys. That was easy. Nobody ever taught me this. I was like, why? Why? It's so easy when you build them this way. And then the last 3 are the oddballs. So there's really no rhyme or reason to that. This one, and then there's the one that uses all the black keys. So I call them the oddballs. You just have to learn those. There's no special trick for those. Here's what I want to do. Well, I'm going to play a song or 2 for you now, and then we'll come back after a break, and maybe I'll continue with this. So I want to play you a couple of songs just to illustrate things that I use in my professional life. Now, I'm fortunate to get to travel and tour, playing jazz mostly, and some 70s. We get to do a sort of a disco throwback band called Satin Love Orchestra, and then I play with Haley Loren, and we've traveled to Japan, Korea, Hong Kong, Italy, Hawaii. It's been such a blessing. Yeah. So actually, cell phones, you can do like. So yeah. No, I enjoy pranking. So I play at a church, and you know, someone always forgets their cell phone. So when it rings, I just play the ringtone. Sort of shaming with a wink. Now I forgot where I was going to go with that. So there's Haley, and we're touring, and I play, and man, I really did forget. And we take songs that everybody knows, and we'll put a twist on them. We'll change them in some way. So that's a swing, a sort of a halftime swing version of A Whiter Shade of Pale, which is famous as an organ solo. It starts with a big organ solo. And we're going to come back to this after the break. I do want to, before we break, and I know all of us are rushing over to the restrooms, including myself, but are there questions at this point that I could answer?
Well, I just wanted to defend yourself before the break, because I have this feeling we have classically trained folks in here, and piano teachers who might be attacking you.
Oh, there's no defense for me. I not at all. No, to defend myself. Absolutely there is a place for training, technique. Most of what I do is made possible by the great training that I had. Technically, the facility that I have, and I wouldn't say that I'm technically, I don't consider myself even, a pure jazz player, let alone classical. I apply what I've learned to make the most of what I can do. So I would love to talk with people who are classically trained and defend myself. But no, there's as far as practicing, in fact, I don't even usually tell my kids to practice. I show them some stuff and, hey, you want to goof around with this for a while and then come back and show me what you've come up with. Because goofing around with something that you like anyway, and they tend to just pick songs that they like. They could be from movies, from TV shows, from video games. They're doing the songs they want to do, and I just teach them that rather than me prescribing what they need to do. And actually, and this was a point I meant to come back to. So I will teach the Pink Panther and never let on that already they have learned the chromatic scale, moving parallel fifths, the blues scale, the pentatonic scale, chord inversions. It's all in there. But I'm not going to tell them that up front. I'm not going to force them to play the scale, the chord inversions, the blues scale, the arpeggiations. I could, in the classical model, they would have to learn. In the classical model, they would have to learn. Because the song uses that. That has this and this. So we could spend time drilling, but we don't. And that's because at the end of that, I can say, oh, by the way, you just played the pentatonic scale, the blues scale, 3 chord inversions, and and you played the chromatic scale in fifths. I didn't scare them off at the beginning by telling them all the hard stuff they'd have to learn. They learned it, and they didn't know they were learning it. And that's music theory by stealth. Yes?
I'm wondering if this technique could be used with other instruments.
Yes, it can.
Violin.
Yes.
Do you know people who are doing this with other instruments?
No, I do not. In fact, what I'm talking to you about today largely is unproven because I haven't been able to find a book that teaches the way that I'm only teaching the way that fundamentally that I understand music. I don't know that I could teach piano in a different way because it wouldn't make sense to me.
The advantage here is it's all visual. You've got the whole.
Yeah.
You're working with visually with a string instrument or a guitar.
Yeah.
You don't have.
And you've hit on something really important. Anyone who's serious about being a musician professionally or just being at a high level probably should learn piano. Piano, you don't have to be a virtuoso, but to learn basic arranger's piano because it's visual, because it's all laid out in front of you. A lot of instruments only play one note at a time. That makes it difficult to understand how your note fits into the whole. And and most of the players that I meet who play instruments, wind instruments in particular, they can play the notes, but they have no idea where that note fits in relation to second chair and third chair. And it's a liability that will catch up with you in time. So really helpful to learn piano where you can see it all in front of you. Yes?
With stringed instruments, you can bend and stretch notes. What's the equivalent of that on the piano?
I'm so glad you asked that. I'm so glad you asked that. Yes. The things you cannot do on a piano. You cannot bend a note. Well, the blues, in particular, is all about bending the note. There's a note in the blues that a piano simply can't play because it's in between two keys. And it isn't even a note, it's sort of a bent note. A harmonica player can do that. Guitar players can bend notes. Wind players, string players. Here's how we do it on piano. So instead of playing in between the notes, which is impossible, we try to give the impression that we did by sliding ever so fast with a grace note or a little slur. So, and this is for our next hour coming up, but when you play the blues, there is a special scale for the blues, and in it, it has a very sour, sharp note halfway up. You won't find that in the classical repertoire much, although Beethoven found it, and some others. So instead, one of the differences, practically one of the only differences between country piano and blues and jazz piano is how we bend the note. So if I want to play the blues, but if I want to play country, same thing, but now I'm not going to use the grind, the sort of things like pushing against each other. I'm going to use whole steps, which sound cleaner and prettier. And Floyd Kramer basically invented this. He played for Patsy Cline and Elvis, and he essentially, Floyd Kramer invented country piano. It's the same stuff. It's all the same stuff. He just doesn't play it with the gritty, nasty blues notes, and it sounds more like this. So here's the jazz player, blues player, same melody, we're going to add the blues notes back in. Something like that. So you get a much, you use the same building blocks, the same, in this case, 3 chords, and what you put on it, how you dress the tree with decorations or ornaments or tinsel or packages, utterly transforms the song. And we're going to get into that after the break. And I think this is a good time to break. So meet me here in 10 minutes. Somebody said, nobody plays boogie woogie anymore. And I said, well, I do. I can tell you boogie woogie came out of ragtime, and ragtime and boogie woogie kind of led into like the jazz combo music. But I swear it was invented to torture pianists, because boogie woogie is all in the left hand. I'm not a left-hander. And it involves, they call it sometimes, one of the famous tunes was called Beat Me Daddy, 8 to the bar. And why you'd want to beat your daddy, I don't know. But 8 to the bar specifically meant you played 8 notes for every measure of music, which instead of was so that had to happen, but then you had to play your right hand. And so you'd end up having to, like play something in the right hand. Okay, so there's that, but then maybe you had to sing. And I will tell you right up front, I am not technically as good as many people that I know. I mean, I do what I can with what I've got, but I think I might have mentioned I didn't study and practice quite as hard as maybe I could have in my formative years. So there's some slop in my playing, but I do enjoy myself. So I hope that my enthusiasm makes up for any deficiencies. So here, I'll give you a taste here. This is Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy. He was a famous boogie. Oh, I forgot. I'm gonna make it a she this time, because why not? She was a famous trumpet around Chicago way. She had a boogie style that no one else could play. She was the top gal of her craft. But then her number came up and she was gone with the draft. She's in the army now, she's blowing reveille. She's a famous boogie bugle from Stephanie B. They made her blow her bugle for her Uncle Sam. They merely made him sad because she couldn't jam. The captain seemed to understand, because the next day the cap went out and got her a band. And now the company jumps when she plays reveille. She's the famous boogie bugle from Company B. A root toot, Rudy a toot toot. She blows at 8 to the bar. She can't blow a note unless the bass and guitar are playing with her. And when the company jumps, she plays reveille. She's the famous boogie bugle girl from Company B. Sucked. Sorry. Yeah, I could have done that a little better. A little off my game. So there's this. The funny thing about that, it is Groundhog Day. I think is it February 2nd. I stole one of those licks from the movie Groundhog Day, in which Bill Murray pretends to learn piano over the course of many Groundhog Days that he had to repeat over and over again. And then he goes into an auction and he plays Boogie Woogie. And I stole this lick from, well, actually I stole two licks. This one, and it goes. So thank you, Bill Murray. And he also taught me what I think of as the beer commercial lick, because that's where I first heard it. And somebody asked, how does a piano player bend a note? That's how. That's going to sound a lot like I bent the note, but I didn't because I can't. So that's, it's like sleight of hand. It's like a magic trick. I think like one of the most beautiful things about playing when it's done right is it'll sound like you have 3 hands or 4 hands. It's like that magic trick of juggling these different things. And I didn't want to get off course here, so I want to talk briefly about genius. I know nothing of genius, but sometimes it pops up in the strangest ways. I'm a huge fan of Irving Berlin's songs, Rodgers and Hammerstein, Lerner and Lowe, Rodgers and Hart. So I played Blue Skies, which is Irving Berlin. Here's another Irving Berlin. Let's see, do I have the words here? I have a photographic memory for music, and I can't remember the words to save my life. So we have, there's no business like show, business like no business I know. Everything about it is appealing, everything the traffic will allow. Oops, I should have practiced. So that's sort of, There's No Business Like Show Business, was a wonderful tune. It closed out Annie Get Your Gun, which we had on an LP records. My kids don't know what those are. And it became the anthem. It was the song, like the big hit from the show. It almost didn't make it in. Irving Berlin didn't think it was a very good song. I can understand why he felt that way. When you're a student, you have to play. Now, what Irving Berlin did was he put that into the song 3 times in a row, which really shouldn't work. Wait for it. How did he get away with that? If I had been in college and I turned that in for my composition class, I wouldn't have passed. So there's something about genius that understands when to break a rule, when to ignore a rule, or when to pretend there aren't any rules. But there's another way to look at this, and anyone from any discipline probably can relate to this. Sometimes the best way to be creative is to limit yourself. To like on purpose say, I'm only going to work in 2 colors, or black and white, or I'm only going to take pictures of wildebeests, or I'm only, you specialize, and by specializing you get a chance to express something that maybe actually is more creative and maybe more, I don't know, like more worthwhile. So here's an example. Supposing I gave you an assignment, anybody, musically trained, not musically trained, and the assignment is this: write a melody that has no rhythm and no rests, no long notes, no short notes, and no breaks. The melody has to sound like this. Actually, that's too slow. I don't want to hurt this, so I probably do. So this is the melody that you have to write, and it has to do that for 5 minutes. Okay. Thank you. Genius. Genius. Now, if I don't appreciate the classics as I should, and it's things like that. Bach was an acknowledged genius of counterpoint, which was sort of a lost art by the time Mozart came around, and he had to be rediscovered. But that isn't even counterpoint. That's just insane genius. That's one of the greatest melodies of all time. And the fact that it had no rhythms, no rests, and no breaks. Wow. So I love little trivia like that. Okay. Somebody asked me to play a song in different styles, and I think I'll do you one better. I'll have somebody name me a song. Okay, a song from the American Songbook. Anybody? Just holler out.
Blue Skies.
Blue? I Got Rhythm. Okay, I just played Blue Skies. I'll use I Got Rhythm. Somebody holler out a key signature. Key of G? Okay, I Got Rhythm in G. And somebody else holler out a style, a genre.
Ragtime.
Ragtime, rhythm and blues, and somebody said swing, ragtime. Okay, I already forgot what the song is. I Got Rhythm? Well, I Got Rhythm kind of is ragtime. For those of you who don't know, and I know you all do, I got rhythm. No, that's not how it goes. I got some music. I got my love. Who could ask for anything more? Oh, wait a minute. Okay, let's slow down a little bit. Let's do his doo-wop. Let's do it swing. New key. So this is being able to play in any, I'm sorry, I was playing in different keys, different styles, different, it's kind of a party trick, but it's actually, it's how I make a living. Okay, like, Jesus, man. You laugh, but that's paid a few of my mortgage bills. Okay, the point that I want to make is first that I came out of jazz studies, out of music school, with a lot of theory under my belt and the ability to play, the music of John Coltrane and Charlie Parker. But I wanted to work, so I toured with a country band. I played weddings, funerals, bar mitzvahs, graduation ceremonies. Nothing you just heard me play have I ever seen sheet music for. This is all coming from understanding me, from playing by ear. Somebody asked, so you're playing by ear? And yes, all my life I've been playing by ear. It's not something like special in one sense. Like, if I had a gift, it's just that I wanted it so badly. I wanted to play. I think from the time, you could verify this, from about the time I could reach the keys, I was banging on a keyboard, on a piano. And I never stopped. And even when our two girls were born and I needed actual work, again, I'd been living on like 10 grand a year or something, like musician, sleeping on floors, and then I had to get a real job, and I worked at a newspaper and then another newspaper and a book publisher. And I thought, I'm not going to be a musician anymore. And fate intervened. I can't hold a job. I was back into music. And so the reason that I think that I was able to be in music is that I'm a jack of all trades, really eclectic, able and willing to use this set of tools. And as you know, they're not all the most complicated tools, but I can reconfigure them in different ways to play almost anything in any key, in most styles. Moving right along. Okay, so here comes the last major outline, like I had an outline. So the Pachelbel canon was written by somebody named Pachelbel, Johann Pachelbel, who'd been forgotten, lost and forgotten for centuries. Mendelssohn, actually, Felix Mendelssohn, brought him back. In fact, Mendelssohn was responsible for rekindling interest in Johann Sebastian Bach as well. Pachelbel died young. Mendelssohn died young. I think he was 38. Mozart died young. Yeah, right. We got a lot of musicians that died young. A lot of my heroes died young. Made bad life choices. So you have this, the Pachelbel canon is the only thing Pachelbel is known for, and it took a Robert Redford movie to bring it into the mainstream. And now I owe half the money I've made at weddings to So that's a popular one at weddings and other events. And I had piano lessons back to back to back, and I've just finished teaching Pachelbel's canon to one student. Next student walks in, and it's Christmas time, and they're playing Jolly Old St. Nicholas. And suddenly, like, my mind explodes. So Pachelbel actually composed Jolly Old St. Nicholas more than 150 years before the songwriters wrote Jolly Old St. Nicholas, but it gets worse. And here I'm going to refer to my notes so that I get this right here. What notes? Yeah, right. That's going to work. Ah! Hey, look, I found my 1099. That's good. So am I going to really have to do this from memory? Because I really actually wrote this down for a reason. Okay, well, from memory. Okay. One day more. So that's the Les Mis. He wrote Les Mis 250 years before Les Mis was written. I actually put the lyrics down so I could actually make a... This isn't working. This is one of the things that goes with being creative and unable to focus. And they have medical terms for it now, but when I was a kid, I was just a space cadet. You know, I was the absent-minded professor, and as you can see, there are pluses and minuses to being so narrowly focused. Like, if I pop open the hood of my car, there's no hope. I don't have any idea what's going on in there. There's so much that I don't do, and this is what I tell people who are like, you know, I wish my child would go and do what you're doing, and I'm like, be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for. So we have that, and then we have like, when a man loves a woman, she can do no wrong. Turns friend if he does her wrong. So there's that. In fact, one of the examples I used earlier was Whiter Shade of Pale. The thing is, as I've been saying over and over again, we're using and recycling the same stuff. The DNA of music goes back. You think decades, you know, like music changes over the decades. So, you know, obviously, you know, the stuff that my grandparents listened to isn't the same stuff that we're listening. No, it really is. It really is. In fact, the things that my great-great-great-great-grandparents were listening to, the things. Okay, I saw a Herzog movie. It was called Cave of Forgotten Dreams. It was about the oldest cave paintings ever discovered. They were recently discovered. And he was granted special access to go in and film in 3D these beautiful cave paintings from over 30,000 years ago. And they found some artifacts, and among those were bone flutes, fragments of bone flutes that had been built, hollowed out bones, holes put on them. So they were able to reconstruct these fragments and then build they didn't use the actual, they built a replica. And the bone flutes could play 5 notes. And those 5 notes in the movie were used to play Amazing Grace. And I thought, how about that? 30,000 years, and here we are using the same notes to play almost everything in Western music. And I think I challenged you before we left for the break and said, well, what if I told you that the blues, like the Pink Panther, is Amazing Grace? So this might be time to prove that. First of all, I mentioned that there's 5 notes, there are 5 black keys, and that they are called the pentatonic scale. And you can use them to play any number of songs, including Amazing Grace. Now that's just like a major scale, but we take 2 notes out, so it's like a subset. Now if we want to make it minor, we start down 1 note and play the same notes. Now if I add 1 note, we get this. That's the blues. That is the blues scale as it's taught. Now my question, and I don't have an answer for this, is how on earth did Africans brought over against their will to the New World invent the blues and gospel, sort of a fusion of the music that they brought with them and the music that they were exposed to essentially invent the basis for everything that we're listening to right now. The Beatles, like the Rolling Stones. It was the blues. It's the blues. And the blues scale was, I don't know, invented's not really the word, discovered. But when I was taught the blues, it was taught to me this way. Minor third, whole step, half step, minor third, whole step. So I spent years and years thinking it's one of the most complicated things in music, only to discover when I sat down to teach it that it is in fact one of the most basic and elemental and simple and beautiful things in music. That note in the middle, by the way, exactly bisects the octave in half. Exactly. So the octaves are notes that are, and by the way, for you physicists, this is exponential. So the orchestra tunes to 440 hertz, 440 cycles. So that would be the oboe plays that A. And then above that you have 880. Sounds like the same note. Below that you have 220. So halfway between those is the blues note. And it doesn't sound good. So you have here this blues scale that wasn't invented by like renowned composers. It came from the ground up, and yet fits perfectly into this, elaborate theory construct that I had to study in school, and in fact fits in with the history of music at least 30,000 years, which to me is astonishing. So we did the canon. Talked about weddings, talked about genius. So I thought I'd like to play a couple songs for you before we open it up for questions, because this is kind of like a concert. And this is a little out of season, but I feel moved to do it because I talk about taking a song and pulling it out of its natural environment and putting it somewhere else. So what I did was I took a Harry Belafonte song. Actually, he just popularized it. I'm sure it's been around. It's called Mary's Boy Child. So put yourself in the Christmas spirit. And this is an arrangement that sounds nothing like Harry Belafonte. Teachers of music, if you're out there, please tell your students about dynamics and phrasing and musicality and tempo, and because I by no means am the last word in like piano pedagogy, far from it. And yet I go and I listen to the recitals, and you have these kids who are technically playing the notes and missing the music entirely. And so play soft, play loud, play big and expansive, play small. You know, use the piano, but just do something with it. That's my plea. So here's an arrangement or a song by me. This is a jazz waltz, sort of in the style of Bill Evans or Vince Guaraldi of Peanuts fame. I could go on, but I actually think that I've been hearing questions and requests, and I want to honor as many of those as I can. So, did you have something? Oh, no? Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I understand the visual and the shaping as you teach notes.
Uh-huh.
How do you approach teaching time, which is not
Time.
visual?
Bob, could you stand and say that again?
Oh, it's okay. I can repeat the question. He's asking, so he understands explaining the notes and the shapes and the pattern of notes, pitches, but how do you explain or teach the concept of time, of rhythm? That's a fair question. The answer is different for everyone, and it's different especially based on what you want to do. Classical music has a certain like an ebb and a flow. Italian is rubato. You can pull on the time and push on the time, and you can extend things. And whereas a lot of modern music is rigid in terms of time, it's so if you're playing a bossa nova or a rock and roll tune or anything else or a country tune, you're expected to play in time, and you're expected to handle complicated time, which we have, highfalutin words like syncopation and so, but like Scott Joplin, early syncopation was. So there's these things, there's rhythmic displacement, there's hemiolas, that's another fancy word for syncopation that happens over a long period of time. And that, playing in between the beats, if you want to be able to read it, you have to study it, just like flashcards. You start with basic rhythms. The first rhythm is called a whole note. It's the whole pizza. When you cut the pizza in half, you get 2 half notes. Cut the pizza in quarters, and you get quarter notes. This actually isn't too hard to understand. Cut it in eighths, you get eighth notes. There are 16th notes. And for some reason, classical composers liked 32nd notes, which is stupid. But I'm not judge. Who am I to judge? Yeah, I'm opinionated. I don't know if I mentioned that at the beginning. I am opinionated, and so learning rhythms cognitively is one thing. It's study and memorization and then practice. On the other hand, learning how to groove is listening. I think it's one of the things musicians forget is that music is an aural thing. It's your ears. And so like reading to play music feels like I don't know, like riding a bicycle to design a building. It's a skill, yes. Reading notes is a skill, but music is hearing and listening. And so if you want a more direct connection with the music that you're doing, you want it to come from your ears to your mind, through your fingers and into your instrument. And one of the fastest ways to get there that a teacher told me is to sing it. So, and I thought it was I was in high school, I thought, well, that's a weird idea, but I tried it, and gosh knows, one of the fastest ways to connect your brain to your fingers is to sing the thing you're trying to learn. You'd be shocked. If I can get my students to do it, and heaven knows some of them just won't, you can be like, you can either have your fingers do what your voice is doing, or you can flip it and have your voice do what your fingers are doing. And in either case, it is a developed skill. It doesn't just happen, but when it does happen, now if I can hear something in my head, I can just skip right past vocalizing it and send it right to my fingers. And so does that answer your question about rhythm? Another question back there.
Some of these modern jazz players can make Bach
Yes,
come alive.
John Lewis and yeah, modern jazz quartet will like start with like variations on a theme by Bach. Well, that's entirely in the tradition of Bach. When Bach played Bach, it was variations on a theme by Bach. Frequently, what Bach played as he improvised, then he would go and write down. he was devout, and he wrote for the church, and he was prolific, but he was not renowned as a composer. He was renowned as an organist, as a player who could, off the cuff, improvise 4-part counterpoint. And I can't tell you how insanely difficult that is. There are so many rules to counterpoint. I tried to play, I got stuck at 2-part inventions. There's 3-part inventions, and then there's Glenn Gould and the Goldberg variations. And so yes, you can start with any classical theme, and that's been going on for a long time. There's pop songs that are like, shameless rip-offs of Tchaikovsky and Beethoven. And okay, another question? Yes.
I was thinking all the time you were talking about how you learned and how much easier it is for you to do it just by what's in your head.
Yeah.
But you're innately rhythmic, and I just think there are students who can't get that.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Oh, hold on. So she asks. She says, "I'm innately rhythmic," and innately presumes that it could never be learned. It could not be absorbed. When I got to college, I got my ass kicked by like middle school kids that were playing circles around me, and they had time that you would not believe. And one of the things I didn't appreciate until I was surrounded by players who could do it better was how important good time is. I didn't have good time. I worked so hard at it. And I mean, there's working drummers who don't have good time, and it's a real drag because drumming is about time. But if you don't focus on it, if you don't put a lot of thought and energy into it, you may very well be like I was coming out of high school, and I was like drunk driver on the keys. I saw another question. Was it back here? Oh, yes. So I play in the 70s throwback Satin Love Orchestra, and we've got 3 horn players, 3 singers, 3 bass players, drummer, a percussionist, 2 keyboard players playing 5 keyboards. And you ask, do I play keyboards? I play keyboards and strings and clavinet and synths and guitar solos and horn things and vibraphone. You would not believe, because what we're doing essentially is recreating recorded music that everybody knows. So we're not really trying to be creative and artistic. We're trying to honor a song that exists and that everybody knows exactly how it goes. And these are studio creations. The players had the luxury of overdubbing. That is to say, they have multi-track recorders, and they can play their part over and over and over and over and over again and layer them together. There's whole albums by Stevie Wonder where he plays all of the parts. He plays the drums, the bass, all the keyboards, he sings, he plays harmonica. And that's through the miracle of overdubbing. And so what we're trying to do is to handle all of the parts, even though there's only so many of us. And that's why it takes more than one keyboard playing several instruments at the same time. Yes?
I'm curious about some of your students who maybe have studied with you from an early age and maybe many years. How are they doing with music? Do any of them
Oh my gosh.
more classical? Or
It
are they
is.
just doing this dubbing and having a great time with it and being great in that sense?
When I started teaching, Ginevra at the Shed heard me play at a concert at the Shed, and she found me in the hallway and she said, "Do you teach?" And I said, "Yes, of course." Yeah, I teach. And so I went into teaching, as I've gone into everything, faking it. What I do here, what I'm expressing to you, how I teach, I thought I was faking it. I still believe on some level that I'm faking it. I'm faking it well enough that many people can't tell that I'm faking it, and others like the way that I'm faking it better than the original, because where I run out, I add a little touches of my own, since I don't know exactly how it goes. And your question was, oh, my students, how are they doing? Well, once I got over my fear of teaching, I discovered that it's just wonderful to see a student light up and just, whatever just like sets them off and just, gets them going and jazzes them. And what'll happen with what I tell parents when I start with a student is, I'm not going to crack the whip right away. You're not going to hear that. You're not going to hear me saying, practice 45 minutes twice a day. In fact, they may go home without a mandate to practice anything. And I'm okay with that, because if a student leaves lessons saying, I couldn't stand my teacher, I hated lessons, my parents forced me to, and then I never touched an instrument again, then I have failed. And I think a lot of music teachers don't see it that way, but I do. If a student isn't having a good time and just quits out of whatever, frustration or boredom, then what was the point? So what we're doing at the beginning is me just feeling out what gets them going. Where, for some kids it's technical, for some kids it's all they listen to is the video games that they play. So we're doing video games. It's all comes from the same place where we end up covering the same topics. And when the student connects with something that they really love, I had a student who loved, turns out, he didn't know this either, I didn't, but it was New Orleans style gumbo, like a sort of a fusion of like Harry Connick Jr. is a modern practitioner, Dr. John, before that, Professor Longhair, and it's like, so that would be, that kid, he was homeschooled and very, very, very shy. And we started playing Mozart. And when he was like a dog with a bone. When that happened for him, he took off. And he's playing that stuff better than I can. I have had, I want to say, 6 or 8 students who, at this point, I have a kid right now who's going to be better than I am in 6 to 18 months. He's insanely fast. And he's left-handed, and he's so quick, and he's so, and when I see that progress, I think it's mostly because I'm not teaching them; they're teaching themselves, because they love it. They can't stop; they don't want to stop, and then I don't have to say practice 30 minutes twice a day, and here's your list. I do that, but I often frame it as, here's a couple of ideas you might want to try out. So mess around with that, goof around. I'd love to hear what you come up with, and they do the grunt work, the hard work, and they don't. And I hopefully won't have to say until they're hooked, and when they're hooked, then you can break out the etudes and the exercises and the esoteric scales and all this stuff, because now they want it. Now they know what they stand to gain if they work on it. Anyway, I think we might be out of time. About 3 minutes. Any more questions? I know that was a long-winded answer, but yes.
Could you expand on the idea of playing by ear?
Uh-huh.
Some people have it and some don't. I thought I heard you contradict that once, but then...
Playing by ear. This is, somebody said, oh, were you good at math? Are you good at math? Not really, no better than average. And when I give this presentation, it sounds as if music is a lot about numbers. And I kind of feel bad that I make it sound that way, because for the first 3/4 of my life, there was nothing numerical about it. I didn't understand that I was using patterns that can be described. I was just winging it, I was just playing whatever came to me, and I called it playing by ear, and I believed that was just something I was born with. There's probably people who will never be musicians no matter how they try, but none of them have been my students. I haven't run into anybody who can't learn to play by ear. And by playing by ear, I no longer mean playing by ear. I mean understanding how to get a certain sound and why they sound that way, and then applying that.
I want to thank Matt for being here.
Thank you.